has like an ear infection that won't go away. So she is sleeping off the stress right now. Poor little baby. So keep Sheila in your thoughts for me. Okay, so I think a lot of you have probably heard about this case, but I have not covered it. I came across it or decided to cover it because I was looking up songs that are based on true crime cases. So my dad actually called me the other day because he knows that I have this channel. He just doesn't know what the name of it is because I don't really want to share it with my parents. I just feel like that'd be weird. Anyway, he called me and said, "Have you heard of the song West Memphis by Lucinda Williams?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And the song is all about the West Memphis Three. She is kind of like a country singer, not a pop country singer, but like, I don't know, like alternative country, I guess, kind of like Brandy Carlisle or Tyler Childers, whatever. So it's a beautiful song if you want to check it out. And then my dad and I talked about the West Memphis Three a bunch. Anyway, so I started looking up some songs on my Patreon. I covered the story of the hurricane, the boxer, Carter, who was wrongly accused of a murder, and Bob Dylan did a song called The Hurricane, which I absolutely love. So I was actually going to do this case on my Patreon, but I decided to share it with the masses. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, the link is below. I think I have 12 or 13 videos on there now. Mostly true crime, but not all true crime. I think for this week I'll do a bonus reading from a book that's about this case. God, I'm just rambling on. I'm so sorry. So, the song that I came across was by The Killers called Jenny Was a Friend of Mine. This case was also covered by Sonic Youth in the 80s, I believe, and the song was called Eliminator Jr. So, let's start when the body of Jenny was found. On August 26th, 1986, a cyclist named Pat Riley was riding through Central Park behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She had woken up at 5 a.m., very groggy. She just kind of wanted to stay in bed. I feel you, you know. But she fought against her exhaustion because I believe she worked on Wall Street and she realized that she was not going to be able to get any other exercise that day. So she wanted to make it outside. So she did. She ended up getting her biking gear on and taking her bike out to Central Park, where she often rode. It was very dark, so she kind of had her head on a swivel, looking for anyone who might try to mug her and take her bike, because I guess that was a thing that happened. It's probably still a thing that happens, but in the 80s, crime was up in New York City. It was higher than it is now, I think. I could be wrong on that. So suddenly she noticed something that looked out of place. She thought at first that maybe it was a homeless woman who was just kind of sleeping off the road, which was a normal sight in New York and still is in most major was reading, it seemed like she found 2 or 3 phones at a local restaurant, but none of them worked for some reason, so she ended up having to go to a payphone on the corner. Around 6:15, she dialed 911 to report what she had seen. She waited where she was for the police to arrive, and they arrived at 6:21, about 6 minutes later. She wanted to meet them kind of outside the park because she couldn't figure out how to explain to them where the body was, so she wanted to lead them there. So they ended up leading them to the young woman's body, and little did they know the perpetrator of the crime was actually watching them from less than 50 yards away. The woman's body was badly bruised, and she had scratches all along her neck, which they later found out were actually scratches from her own fingernails trying to get air because she was strangled. The police ID'd the woman as Jennifer Levin, and she was only 18 years old, so barely legally an adult. She was always described as being pretty and vivacious. She had dark hair, she was funny, she enjoyed going to parties and being social, and just kind of liked to have a good time. They quickly found out that she had been dating a man named Robert Chambers, who was 19 years old at the time, going strictly on appearances. Chambers was conventionally handsome, looked kind of like a well-off kid. He had been to prep school, but he went on scholarship because his family wasn't very well off. He was accepted to Boston University, but he ended up being kicked out after a semester, I believe, for drugs or petty theft or something along those lines. So, reportedly, Robert said that he often felt social pressures of being the least well-off child among his classmates. And he said that his grades suffered as a result of that. But apparently by the time he got to college, like I said, he had fallen into a life of petty theft, alcoholism, and drug abuse. Police found that he also had prior arrests for disorderly conduct, as well as petty theft and burglaries. These crimes were to fund his drug and alcohol abuse. When they interviewed Chambers, they found that he was giving inconsistent stories. The night of the murder, both Jennifer and Robert were seen He said that she scratched him because she was upset that he didn't want to see her anymore. He stumbled over the facts of where the fight took place. At first he said it was in front of the donut shop, and then he changed his story to the fact that it took place on a different side street. But no one witnessed it, and they continued to push him on it, and he finally admitted that he had gone to Central Park with Jennifer. He said that they sat on a bench and had the same argument. He said that she scratched him in the face because she was so angry. And then he said that she got up to go to the bathroom behind him and suddenly grabbed him by the neck and knocked him to the ground. This guy is a pretty big guy, and Jennifer was pretty tiny, so that doesn't sound very reasonable to me. But that was the story that he went with. He then said that she started to sexually assault him, so he threw her off of him, and he said that when he did, she became unresponsive. Interesting story he told there, but her marks around her neck showed that she had been strangled. It is very difficult to strangle someone to death by accident. But despite the fact that the confession had a lot of holes in it, at least they had a confession. Chambers was arrested and actually secured bail through his family and the owner of the bar. The owner of the bar's name is Jack Dorian. He ended up putting up his townhouse as collateral for a bail bond. And I'm wondering if he regretted this, because in 1987, the New York State Liquor Authority voted to suspend their liquor license and fine the owner $1,000 for serving alcohol to minors. Later, the owner, Jack Dorian, had to come to a private settlement with Jennifer's parents on their claim that the bar had served alcohol to Chambers in excess. So Chambers ended up being charged with and tried for 2 counts of second-degree murder. His defense was that Levin's death had occurred during rough sex that she instigated. He was defended by Jack Littman, who considered using the insanity defense because he had used that same defense for Richard Herron, who had bludgeoned his ex-girlfriend, who was a Yale University student named Bonnie Garland, to death with a hammer as she lay sleeping at her parents' in New York. So Jack Littman instead decided to make Jennifer look as though she was asking for it, as if the murder was her own fault, that she had put herself in harm's way by enjoying partying or dressing in a sexy way. He painted her as a promiscuous woman, saying that she had a sex diary and trying to admit that as evidence into the court. So basically, his defense was victim blaming to the nth degree. The jury ended up being deadlocked for 9 was made with prosecutors. It's so hard for me to even say this. He got 15 years. 15 years for her murder. And he didn't even get charged with murder. He got charged with manslaughter in the first degree. So, basically, the murder was blamed on Jenny for being just a girl who liked to party, which is not a crime and does not deserve death. Okay, so Chambers served most of his 15-year sentence at Auburn State Prison, but was later moved to Clinton Correctional Facility due to infractions at the prison itself, which cost him all of his time off for good behavior. He assaulted a correctional officer and was cited repeatedly for weapons and drug infractions, some of which resulted in additional criminal charges. Ellen Levin, the mother of Jennifer Levin, also pleaded before the New York Parole Board to deny him parole. Nearly 5 years of his term were served in solitary confinement. He ended up getting out of jail in 2003 after serving his maximum sentence of 15 years. In November 2004, he was